Why are human arms so small? Traxon turned to look at his friend, his long arms draped on the table in front of him. He followed his gaze and saw that a human just entered the pub, hands in pockets. Of all of the bizarre things humans have, resist, do, live, or whatever, why is it they have the shortest arms of all the GR? I don't know, Traxon huffed, as he turned eyes to his own arms dangling low to the ground. He scanned around and found that everyone else did have long arms. I would pity them for having difficulty reaching for things, but then they jump so well I doubt they would even have that as a problem. Yeah, Traxon rubbed his head. Wonder why that is. The two went back to their drinks for a time, relaxing, until a stool slid next to their table and up hopped the human. Hello, the human beamed, as he placed a long tube straw to his mouth and sucked on it for a time. Heard you were talking about me. Traxon frowned for a moment. How'd you know we were talking about you? Human hearing, the human chuckled, sucking on the tube straw again. Right. Traxon's friends narrowed his eyes, then looked around the table to see what the straw was attached to. Traxon was too curious about the odd straw, so he leaned over the table for a peek. He blinked with disbelief when he saw a massive keg, the straw feeding out of it. Yeah, the stuff you have here is a bit weak, the human shrugged. But I guess you can't help it when beer is classed a Grade B controlled substance, so I just make do, right? Traxon and his friend stared at the human. Shot that Brinks, a drink notorious for binge drinking with the youth, was being drank by the keg by a human, and said human thinking it was too weak. What were you talking about? The human asked. Oh, Traxon's friend cleared his throat. Right, I was wondering why humans have such small arms. Small? The human frowned, glancing to his arm. I suppose it is small, comparatively, but there is a reason to it. What would that be? Well, it goes back to the hunter-gatherer days of humanity, the human began. As you know, unlike most other predatory types of sentience of the GR, we humans are endurance predators, chase prey all day until they are exhausted, able to keep from overheating with sweat glands and so on. Right, everyone knows that, Traxon nodded, taking a sip from his glass. But what do the short arms have to do with that? I'm getting to that, the human smirked. All of us sentients evolved to have similar features, to use tools in advance, right? Well, the primary tool humans used in the beginning was the spear. You mean pointy sticks? Traxon's friend scratched his nose. Why would you need that? Spears were used for hunting primarily, and war when needed, using them to stab and kill our prey after we corner it. Makes sense. But you see, in a lot of cases, trapping our prey was pretty difficult, since most of the time they congregated in large open areas. They would just run away far enough so that we could do nothing to them, and for a carnivore to attack us instead. What does any of this have to do with your small arms? Traxon's friend asked impatiently. I'm getting there, the human smiled. You see, a good advantage of a spear is reach, a long stick, and stick them with the pointy bit. But what's better about them is that they soar through the air faster than we can run, even better with fletching, which then led to the bow and arrow. So what we would do as hunters was throw our spears at our prey and impale them with the spears, killing them. Traxon and his friend looked at each other, then the human. Sorry, throw? Traxon worked the strange word in his mouth, finding the oddness of the human language working in his mouth. What do you mean? Right, sorry, the human laughed. I guess you wouldn't know that since your bodies aren't really built for it. It's the reason why darts aren't in these places. Man, I miss playing darts. Can you explain then? The human frowned for a moment, then left Traxon and his friend. Later he came back with a knife in hand. It's really better with a demonstration. Would you get up, hold this knife, and chuck it as hard as you can at the headboard above the counter where you are? Traxon did as he was told, stood from his chair, taking the knife in hand. Right, so what you want to do is to try and make it stick in the wood, okay? Traxon didn't believe that was possible, not from where he was standing, even with his long arms. There was no way they were long enough to reach the wood to make the knife stick. Pulling his arm back, moved his arm forward and letting the knife go. As expected, it didn't go far, clattering to the ground. Good try, but don't feel bad. You and many of the other sentients don't have bodies built for such a maneuver, the human said, as he went to pick up the knife on the floor. He came back and faced the wood board above the counter, where he told Traxon to throw the knife. I'm fussy on the exact details, but human arms are built for explosive output, adding the maximum amount of energy when throwing something. It's the reason why humans can throw things that can go 100 miles an hour, like a baseball. I believe that's about 367 volts. No way! Traxon's friend shook his head in disbelief. Over 3 times the urban road speed limit? Applied to an object that you throw? Yeah, the human nodded, his face calm. I can show you. Traxon and his friend watched the human, along with the rest of the pub since the little display a few moments ago, wind his arm up, holding the knife by the blade. Then the arm blurred with frightening speed, expanded outwards, knife no longer in his hand when it stopped. At the same time, there was a metal shuddering sound coming from the counter. There were gasps of shock and awe, when everyone saw that the knife was stuck in the wood tip first. See? Human arms are built to efficiently transfer power into objects, so that if we throw something it can go far and fast, the human said as he went to take the knife out of the board, tossing it about in his hand. It's not exactly the best thing to throw, the weight all weird and unbalanced. Now you can imagine how much damage a spear can do to an animal or some other living creature when thrown by a human. Traxon and the many other patrons of the pub looked at their own large, long arms, shuddering at the thought of being impaled and killed by a long stick. Humans? An audible sigh came from the crowd. They're so weird.